Hey everyone, what I'd like to do in this video is talk about my own storage and SSD setup and talk about how I'm going to adapt it and rework it in 2026. As you can see, I've got a lot of enclosures here and SSDs and accessories, and I'll touch upon these in this video. It's going to be more of a relaxed conversational style video, and it's more of a personal video in the respect that I'll be showing you my personal SSD setup. But hopefully you will find value from what I'm talking about because you can draw comparisons from my setup to yours. Now, one disclaimer before we go on is that I have a Synology NAS, and I use that Synology NAS as the heart of my whole storage setup. It's where I store all my most important files. I sync YouTube videos there all the time as well. And because I use that NAS, all the SSDs which I do have are kind of disposable. Now, I don't want to dispose these. I keep these for years. And that's kind of what I mean. I keep my SSDs way past where most people would sell them. I'm happy to run these until they die. And that's because everything important is on the NAS. I use these SSDs to store files which are synced on the NAS, or app and game installations which can be downloaded again, or for example, caching, which you use when you're video editing, and then you just keep caching files. So I don't have anything important on it. I know that's different from a lot of people's situations, but for me, everything important is going to the NAS, and that puts me in a really good position with how I use SSDs and how I manage my storage. Okay, let's get started. The first situation which I have is this here. This is the new M5 MacBook Pro. It's the base model, which retails at £1,600 here in the UK, but I managed to pick it up for £1,300 during Black Friday. So it's got 16 gigabytes of memory, the M5 chip, and 512 gigabytes of storage. Now, 512 gigabytes is fine for me day to day, because I'll be using that for browsing the web, for research, for documents, for watching YouTube. You know, it's mostly just a kind of day-to-day thing that I'll be using it for. But I am keen to have options with it. And by that, I mean that I would also like to use that laptop to do some basic video editing and do some gaming. Yeah, I know a lot of people are going to laugh when I talk about gaming on a Mac, but that's got a really nice display, which is 120 Hertz. So it's a really good display. It's got very low latency. It can't play modern AAA games, well, some games, but really it's not a powerhouse. But I do want to play games on it. And that's where these enclosures and SSDs and accessories come in. Okay, this one here, this is an Oracle USB hub. And the trick up its sleeve is that this actually has an M2 SSD. So this is a good accessory to buy for any laptop. The main limitation here is that it's only got a 10 gigabits per second connection. So, you know, for storage, it's not as fast as you would like. It's fine for basic things, but you know, ideally you don't want to use that. But all of the other enclosures here, and if I count them, I think I've got 5 here on display. These are all Thunderbolt enclosures. The Ugreen, OWC, and Zeek enclosure are all Thunderbolt 4. These are Thunderbolt 5. This is one that I use all the time. It's got a 4 terabyte Western Digital drive in there just now. This is the same enclosure, but it's on older firmware. But it still has a Thunderbolt 5 connection. You're just better using it with a Gen 4 SSD. So I've got options here, but my MacBook Pro is limited to Thunderbolt 4, not Thunderbolt 5. But Thunderbolt 4 is more than enough because these enclosures can get, you know, over 3,000 megabytes per second reading and writing. So really, really good. Perfect for installing apps and games. So it's not as fast as the internal drive, but you know, for what I'm going to be using it with, it's perfect. So I'm quite fortunate. I have all of these accessories already. And I do have some SSDs that I can use, which is good because, as I've said before, the demand for AI has doubled RAM prices, but we're also starting to see SSD prices go up as well. And I'm trying to make do with what I have. And if I do buy an SSD in 2026, I'm going to be sensible. I'm not going to pay crazy money, and I'm not going to buy an SSD if I don't really need it. I'm trying to use what I have because I do have some options. So my MacBook situation, because of I've got SSDs and I've got enclosures, very easy solution for me. I'm tempted to actually take my 4TB Western Digital and use it, but I don't know, I'll see. So that's one problem. It's quite an easy one to solve. And I think a lot of people will face that. Certainly if you've got a MacBook, it's something you might want to consider. If you've got like a Windows gaming laptop, you're quite lucky. You usually have two M.2 SSD slots, so you can just put 2 drives in there. You can increase the storage quite easily. But with a MacBook and with many thin Windows laptops, like Surface laptops, etc., you're kind of stuck with what you buy it with, which is where these enclosures come in, and they're really, really useful for that. You don't pay crazy money to increase the storage. You just buy the enclosure and then you can stick whatever SSD you want in it. So there's another situation, or kind of 2 situations, but they're tied together. Another situation I'm going to adjust and adapt in 2026. And for that, I will switch over to my webcam. So this is a very crude way of showing you my Mac Studio, which is what I'm recording with just now. You can see it sitting there on this clear stand. And that has this Acasis enclosure. That is what I'm storing everything on. And I get, you know, like up to, it's like 6,500 megabytes per second reading and writing. So my Mac Studio is over there. That's what I use to do YouTube. It's my main computer. And I've got that 4TB Western Digital drive in this enclosure here. So it's a good setup, but I can improve it because I've got this other enclosure. Now, my original idea was I'm going to put all my important video files on this 2TB Sabrent drive, which will free up this Acasis enclosure to put in the 4TB Western Digital and use it for caching. It just, you know, helps me with video editing. So that's what I'm using just now. I've got the internal storage in the Mac Studio, which is 512, and I've got a 4TB drive here. But interestingly, it's not the only storage solution I have for that Mac Studio. I've got the NAS. I've obviously got the NAS, which, you know, everything important is going from the Mac Studio to the NAS, but also I've got the Mac Mini over here. So my setup for my Mac Studio is that I back it up using this drive. So this external SSD, and it's actually connected just now. This is red hot, but I want to show you. Hopefully it'll be okay. Let me see. There we go. It's got another FireCuda drive in here. This is connected to my Mac Mini, and this stays on 24 hours a day. So my Mac Studio backs up every single hour of the day. It backs up every hour of the day, and it backs up with Time Machine to this, which is a network accessible external drive through the Mac Mini. It's a bit of a bizarre setup, but basically I've got the Time Machine backup on the Mac Studio connecting to my Zeek enclosure here through the Mac Mini. And the Mac Mini actually backs up every day to my NAS directly, just going through Ethernet, because I've got a 10 gigabit Ethernet connection at the back through another Thunderbolt connection. So it's quite an interesting setup, but I will say it's kind of overkill. It is overkill. I know it is overkill. It's kind of unnecessary, and I'm kind of at the point where if I'm not going to use the Mac Mini for anything, you know, kind of practical that I really need, I really should just give this a new home. And what I can do is back up the Mac Studio, you know, through an external drive or through the NAS or something else. It's kind of overkill, the setup just now. But that's what I'm using just now. Okay, the one thing you'll see here dominating here is this accessory from RayCue, and this is brand new, and this is kind of what prompted this video, because it's really made me rethink how I'm going to tackle things. This is a new, I think it's newish. It's a stand for the Mac Studio, and it's Thunderbolt 5, and it gives you a lot of different connections. It gives you a lot of options. And if I switch back to the overhead camera, you'll see what I mean. Okay, so this sits underneath your Mac Studio, and if I quickly, just as a reminder, my Mac Studio is there, and I've just got it on a clear stand to prevent dust. But if I switch it to this, I'm going to get two 10 gigabits per second type A ports. I've got 3.5mm headphone jack, and then I've got some memory card slots. And then at the back, we've got the Thunderbolt 5 connection, which goes to the Mac Studio. We've got 2 HDMI and a DisplayPort, and then I've got a USB-C connection as well. But you might be thinking, well, this doesn't really help me from a storage perspective. And so far, you would be right. But underneath here, what we have is 2 M2 SSD slots. And that is useful because these can be set up in RAID, or you can just set them up individually. But my idea with this just now, my current way of thinking of how I can improve my Mac Studio is that instead of using an external enclosure for caching files and different things like that, I could steal this FireCuda from here. I could steal this one here, put them here, and put them in RAID. And that means that I'm going to get really fast speeds when they're in RAID, and I can use it for caching for DaVinci Resolve. But it just gives me a lot of options here because I've got pretty much, in fact, I may be able to crudely show you this with the power of the MacBook. I've got nearly every single connection port used on that Mac Studio. I'm really utilizing pretty much every bit of bandwidth I can. And you can see here, I've got both ports at the front being used, but if you look at the back here, you can see I'm using every single port. I think I've got one spare Thunderbolt 5 port. That's all I've got at the back. I've got one spare Thunderbolt 5 port, which is only spare just now because I'm rethinking my SSD setup. I might, utilize it in a while. I might connect one of these enclosures. So that's my setup just now. I've got just one SSD enclosure, but this here, I mean, I'm not going to publish a review of this for another couple of weeks at least, I think. But this to me looks like it's going to be a game changer for me because it means that I'm going to free up some ports, I think. I mean, I do need to connect this to a Thunderbolt 5 port, but then I'm going to get 2 M2 SSD slots down here. I'm going to get all these extra, Type A ports and HDMI ports as well. I love these types of accessories. There's obviously a lot of thought going into this. It's a shame there's not more accessories out there just now for this. We're starting to see Thunderbolt 5 accessories coming out, but this is what I want to see. I want to see more companies do this, utilize that 88 gigabits per second connection that Thunderbolt 5 offers and give me a ton of different ports. And it's good having USB hubs and different things, but I do like accessories like this that just sit underneath it. It's just practical because that Mac Studio sits in the same position all the time, and it will for the next few years. So having this underneath it is just practical for me because I'm adding additional ports, and it just makes it easier for me to connect monitors and obviously SSDs as well. So effectively in 2026, what I'm trying to do is add a useful external storage solution to my MacBook, which is very easy for me to tackle because I have spare drives and spare enclosures. But the big thing for me is my Mac Studio. I want to get as much storage going through that Mac Studio for caching, for storing files, and just to make this whole system that I use here more powerful and more practical. And like I said, everything important is going through my NAS as far as storing things long term. But the NAS, despite the fact I've got a 10 gigabits per second network, it's not as fast as a direct Thunderbolt 4 or Thunderbolt 5 connection, which is where SSDs come in. It's better to work with these types of files directly to get the speed, and then when they're on the SSD, sync them to the NAS. Again, my Mac Mini setup here is totally overkill. It really is, and I am starting to think maybe if I don't use it for Docker or something else like that, I should get rid of it. But it's quite interesting that you can use the Mac Mini like that. It's such a fantastic little 24-hour machine, and it's really good at doing that. So that is my current SSD and storage setup. That's what I'm working with just now, and that's how I'm trying to improve things in 2026. But everything here is evolving. I suspect over the next few months, once I've reevaluated everything and found out how I set things up. I'll probably sell some of these enclosures. They're just starting to gather dust, and I don't like tech gathering dust too long. But these things are fantastic, which is why I've kept them so long. But I'd love to hear from you guys. I hope you've enjoyed the video, and hopefully you can draw some comparisons to, from my setup to yours. But I hope you have enjoyed it. And if you've got any questions about what I'm doing here, or any questions about your own setup, please do leave a comment below. If you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up, give us a subscribe, and until next time, take care.